We're moving on with a check on some of the top headlines in the international papers today with Flo Villamino, who's been thumbing through them eagerly.
As always. Hey, Kat.
And clicking perhaps more. We're going to start off with one of our top stories in our main news bulletin. Donald Trump, what he's had to say about Afghanistan, among other things. The American journalists have been staying up late to get their articles out for us.
Indeed. Now, this is, of course, America's longest war, nearly 16-year-old conflict. Trump says there will be no blank check, but a lot of papers are pointing out that, in a way, there already has been a blank check. It has cost a lot of taxpayers' money. According to the Washington Post, $714 billion since 2001. And you can see they're focusing on one aspect of this huge cost, and that is costly failures. You can see number one there, cashmere goats. What in the world is this? Well, this was a plan, a U.S.-funded plan to actually jumpstart Afghanistan's cashmere industry, and it cost $6 million in U.S. taxpayers' money. So the plan involved purchasing and transporting rare Italian goats. I think there were 7 of these or 9 rather, rare Italian goats, and bringing them to Afghanistan to breed with native Afghan goats. The problem is it didn't work. Many of the goats got sick and died. The project was a flop, a very expensive one, and so this is just one of 6 flops that were very costly.
That's absolutely fascinating, isn't it? Quite a lot of criticism, even in conservative papers, of the way that taxpayers' money has been spent in Afghanistan.
Indeed. Now, we looked at the Washington Post. Let's look at the Washington Times, that says there has been a colossal waste of money. In fact, several colossal wastes of money. The Washington Post Times, rather, says that, you know, some people are talking about $700 billion over the past 16 years. Some analysts say the true cost actually tops $1 trillion. So we're talking about a tremendous amount of money.
Yes, almost unimaginable.
And you can see that headline there. They say the problem is that the mission in Afghanistan provides little return on this huge investment in money and in troops. Now, the Washington Times points out that Donald Trump says this is a mess that he inherited from his predecessors. And indeed, the Washington Times, a very conservative paper, agrees with that analysis, but points out that, you know, Trump has said that he's going to stay in and fight for the win. And so they say, you know, that's what should be done, because no president wants to be the president that loses Afghanistan.
Yeah, not many options available to him either. Staying with American military matters, we've been reporting on this US Navy ship that had a collision near Singapore yesterday. All US Navy ships, it seems, are going to be stopping their operations for a couple of days.
Absolutely. This is a major story, or turning into a major story in the United States. And there's a very interesting analysis piece in USA Today. This is by a Navy veteran, actually, Sean Van Driver, who points out this is the 4th major maritime incident this year for the US Navy, and he says something needs to change. A collision at sea should never happen aboard a U.S. Navy warship, because there's a very in-depth process to avoid these kind of collisions involving very sophisticated radars, but also crew members on board whose job is to avoid these kind of collisions. So clearly something is failing. Now, what usually happens in these cases is that the commanding officer is fired, but he points out that, you know, that will not begin to correct years of underfunding the maintenance of ships, for instance, and inadequate prioritizing. Essentially not training Navy members of personnel correctly, and not training commanding officers correctly as well.
You got a very interesting cartoon from a Chinese newspaper that's taking a look at this.
Absolutely. But before we get to the cartoon, let's look at the editorial in China Daily that actually they're very critical of the U.S. Navy themselves, saying, look, they claim their presence is helping to safeguard freedom of navigation in the South China Sea, but it's actually the Navy that's becoming a hazard in Asian waters. They call it a dangerous obstacle. Now, keep in mind, this is the official Chinese paper that says China, meanwhile, has been making an effort to boost navigational safety. So putting themselves forward and criticizing the U.S. Let's take a look at that cartoon, though. It depicts that situation. You can see this Navy ship here, this U.S. Navy ship, talking about how they want freedom of navigation, but you can see they have clumsily run into that oil tanker there that's looking very upset by the situation.
Certainly easy to understand news story there in that pictorial form. We're going to move on to newspapers in Spain. Papers there and elsewhere, of course, still reeling after that attack on Thursday in Barcelona.
Let's take a look at some editorials. First of all, from El Mundo. So this is the national, well, one of the national papers in Spain. They're talking about how there needs to be national unity in the fight against jihadism. This kind of national unity between the central government in Madrid and regional authorities, for instance, the Catalan authorities in Barcelona. We need real cooperation, says El Mundo, not superficial lip service, not some photo for the gallery. So far, too many people are making it political. So that's El Mundo, which is a national paper. Let's take a look at a regional paper. This is La Vanguardia it's a Catalan paper. It's actually applauding the work of police officers and actually applauding politicians as well. According to this paper, there has been unity amongst politicians. And so it says this is what we need. We need a very effective police work, but also political unity.
All right, we're going to move on to something much lighter to end on. We are talking about the Edinburgh Festival Fringe, which is still going on.
You were just there.
Days. I was just there. Wasn't going to say that. And the funniest joke has been identified among all those millions of jokes.
It must be really hard to decide what's the funniest joke at such a festival. This is actually the 10th annual time that they've done this best joke, and it's actually a Chinese comedian who won. You can read all about him in The Independent. So this is the 10th annual award for Dave's funniest joke. I don't know who Dave is, but he won that award.
It's a TV channel.
Oh, TV. Okay, well, there we go. You can see that. So that's Ken Chang. 33% of the vote. He won the vote. So what is this joke? That's what you want to know. I must admit, I really like this. It's this is a joke. I'm not a fan of the new pound coin, but then again, I hate all change. So that's his joke won first prize. Second prize was pretty good too. This is Frankie Boyle. Trump's nothing like Hitler. There's no way he could write a book. So pretty good one-liners there, I guess you could say. I must admit, I like the first one.
Save a couple of those up for Christmas. Rival your
dad jokes.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks very much. Flo Villamino there with the dad jokes and the look through the international papers here on France 24. We're going to take a short break. See you in a couple of minutes' time.